heads up that we're live for our remote audience. Okay, I got the heads up that we're live, so I will call the January meeting of the Faculty Council to order. I am not Mimi Chapman. Mimi could not be with us today, so I've been asked to preside over the meeting in her absence. If anyone does not know who I am Jill Moore. I am the Secretary of the Faculty, and I'd like to welcome you back to Faculty Council for spring of 2023. I hope this semester is off to a good start for everyone. For those of you who are here in person, you'll notice that we are in a new meeting room today. Maybe that's noticeable on the Zoom as well. I'd like to thank the Gilling School of Global Public Health, my alma mater, by the way, for making this space available to us and supporting our use of it. We are very, very grateful for that because it is a new space for us. And we also happen to be short-staffed today, not just up at the front of the room, but also in the back. So because of that, I will ask in advance for your forbearance if we hit any bumps in the road while we're learning our way around. We are going to be back here for next month's meeting as well, and we'll have all the bumps ironed out by then. One thing to know about this room for today, as you're all aware, when you do speak, we ask for you to use a microphone so that folks who are on Zoom can hear you. The microphones that we have in this room are the ones that are set up in the aisles, and we need you to use those. Since we're shorthanded, we'd certainly appreciate your help in getting up and going to the mic or helping each other with passing the mics if possible. That would be greatly appreciated. I have quite a few announcements to make before we get into the content of our agenda. First, I wanted to report the results of the vote to amend the Faculty Code of University Government. In November, the Faculty Council approved amendments to the code that would reduce the length of the terms served by the chair of the faculty and the secretary of the faculty, and that would create the new positions of chair-elect and past chair. You'll recall that code amendments have to be passed not only by the Faculty Council, but then subsequently by an electronic vote of the entire faculty. So we conducted that vote in early December and the amendments did pass. They have a delayed effective date, so they won't affect the term of the chair of the faculty that we're going to elect this spring. But in 2025, we'll elect our first chair-elect, and then the process will move along from there. So thank you all for participating in the discussions of that code change and the votes on those changes. Next announcement, Professor Beth Posner is holding listening sessions on the future of the Carolina Women's Center. If you have not yet participated in a listening session and would like to do so, you have 3 more chances before that wraps up at the end of January. Information about how to register for a session is in the January Faculty Governance newsletter that was emailed earlier this week. So if you haven't seen that, I hope you can find it in your inbox. Comes from the Office of Faculty Governance account. So you can find that there, and it's also on the Faculty Governance website under the news tab, information about how to register for one of those sessions. The first one, they're all on Zoom, and the first one is this coming Monday. So if you want to register, I would encourage you to take a look at that soon. Nominations are now being accepted for honorary degrees to be awarded at the spring 2024 commencement or later. The newsletter that I mentioned earlier has information about how to make a nomination, and that is also on our website under the awards tab. So those nominations are due by February 23rd. This is the highest honor that the university gives, and we certainly love to get robust nominations from faculty members for people who are deserving of that honor. Did I say the nominations are due by February 13th? That is the deadline for that one. We've got a lot of surveys and different timelines and things like that going on. The Fixed Term Faculty Committee is exploring the possibility of having a fixed term faculty networking event during the spring semester. They've put together a survey to help them with their planning for that. Once again, in the faculty newsletter is where you will find a link to that survey as well as an update on the committee's work. And that survey closes on January 31st. So please consider responding to the Fixed Term Faculty Committee about their survey about a networking event. Another survey. The university and UNC Health are jointly sponsoring a project to study housing affordability in and around Chapel Hill. And as part of that, they're surveying all employees, including faculty and including graduate students. The link to that survey is also in the January faculty governance newsletter, and that survey also closes on January 31st. So there's a lot of opportunity to be surveyed, but I have saved the best and most important one for last. This is also the time of the year when the Office of Faculty Governance asks faculty members to complete a survey that we call the Faculty Interest Survey. And the purpose of this one is to let us know about your interest in serving in faculty governance, either as a member of this body or one of our committees. If you are here, it's probably because at some point in the past you filled out one of those surveys. And I hope that you will fill it out again this year, and also encourage your colleagues to fill out this survey. It gives you the chance, in addition to the faculty council, we have, I think it's about 25 committees. I have a hard time keeping track of that number for some reason, but you do not have to be a member of faculty council to be on one of the committees. We have committees that address a wide range of topics, lots of different areas of interest around the campus. I think that's one of the great strengths of our faculty governance system, is that it gives so many people an opportunity to participate because of the way our committee structure is set up. So I hope that you and your colleagues will complete that. Filling out the survey does not guarantee anyone a spot on the ballot, nor does it obligate anyone to anything, but it does provide really valuable information that the nominating committee, which will be meeting frequently throughout the month of February, the nominating committee will use that to put together the ballot for the spring elections. Now, having encouraged you to encourage your colleagues, I do want to warn you of a pitfall. Please don't just forward your email, because you have a unique link to your survey in there. So if you just encourage your colleagues by forwarding your email, somebody might fill out your interest survey for you and sign you up for something you're not interested in. So I would encourage you instead to tell your colleagues to look for their own unique link in their email, or if they can't find it, that you can contact the Office of Faculty Governance if it's gone missing, and we'll get you a survey link. We really want people to do that one. That closes on January 26th. Is that right, Helena? Yes, thank you. Okay, any questions about any of the announcements? Okay, that was a lot. Do those surveys. Next on the agenda, we have an update on COVID-19. Is Dr. Weber with us?
I am.
Fantastic. Great. Welcome to David Weber. Is Amir Barzan with us as well? Yes. Okay,
I am.
fantastic.
Thank you. Yep.
Great. So we have Drs. Amir Barzan and David Weber with us again today to let us know where things are as we enter the fourth year of the pandemic and to answer questions. Before they start, I want to acknowledge how generous they have been with their time and to say a heartfelt thank you to them. Every time we ask them to come to a council or a committee meeting, they say yes, and we know they're very busy people. So David and Amir, I just wanted to let you know that we appreciate you, and now I will turn it over to you.
Thank you very much for the opportunity to provide you this update, and I will focus on the new XBB sublineages. Could I have the next slide, please? Thank you. So this is just where we stand right now. You can see here that over the last couple of weeks, test positivity, hospitalizations are down. Deaths always lag behind hospitalizations. I don't want to minimize the impact of COVID. We're losing a little over 500 people a day to COVID. It was and is the third leading cause of death in the United States for the last 3 years, surpassed only by cancer and heart disease. But the good news is that cases and hospitalizations are falling somewhat. Next slide. And I should say the reason for the recent bump is twofold. On one hand, it's due to travel and mixing from Thanksgiving, Christmas, New Year's, and also the growth of the SBB variants. We've down from about 150 healthcare providers out each day down to about 50 or 60. We still have a burden on the hospital, 50 to 60 hospitalizations, but our test positivity for symptomatic patients, as you can see, has fallen from about 16% to 12%. And for asymptomatic patients, it's fallen from a little over 7% to about 5%. Fortunately as well, flu is substantially down, although I will note we've had 8 people die of flu this year at the hospital. And we've seen a dramatic, that last 22 should be RSV, which is a 50% reduction than last week. So all 3 of the major viral pathogens we've been following have been decreasing. Next slide. Here's just some more of our data showing you our hospitalizations. On the lower right, you can see all our viral respiratory pathogens that we monitor weekly, and they're falling. On the lower left, you can see we monitor our number of employees who are out for flu. All of those, as you can see, are substantially decreasing. Next slide. So XBB was first reported from India in August of 2022. That's 0.1. But the 1.5 variant was first reported from New York and Connecticut in late October. The BQ subvariants and the XBB, which have been dominant in the last 6 weeks, do contain additional mutation sites. They escape from all the monoclonal antibodies we use, so we no longer are using them. And they have the highest escape from vaccines and natural immunity of all the variants. But we'll talk more about the vaccines in a minute. They do have a similar severity of disease to other Omicron subvariants. The XBB is the most of 1.5, has the effective reproductive number of 1.6, and it is more contagious than other sublineages for two reasons. One is escape from immunity, and two, it binds more tightly to its receptor, the ACE2 receptor there. However, all the evidence suggests that all three of our currently used for a mild to moderate disease antivirals retain all their activity. Recent papers in the last 10 days show that in effectiveness, Paxlovid reduces the risk of hospitalizations in high-risk people by 50%, deaths by 75%. And now there's data that not only if you get sick, but if you take Paxlovid when you're ill, it reduces the risk of long COVID. I should say, by the way, COVID vaccine also reduces the risk of long COVID, even if you get ill. The new bivalent vaccine has lower neutralizing antibodies to XBB than other SARS-CoV-2 variants, but it's still quite effective, particularly against hospitalizations and deaths. And vaccination, in addition to reducing long COVID, there is an increased risk of death after COVID, just like flu, in the 30 to 90 days after from cardiovascular and strokes. It reduces that by 50%. Unfortunately, only about 18% of eligible people 5 and over have received the bivalent booster, and even the highest risk group, people over 65, only 35% have received the bivalent booster. Next slide. Here is the latest data from the CDC. You can see a dramatic, just over the last month, increase of the XBB 1.5. I expect that to grow as well. You can see that the BQ variants are decreasing and the XBB subvariant is increasing. And I do expect that we will see further shift to the XBB subvariant throughout the rest of the month in February. Next slide. Just to show you, this is a study just released from Israel, which has a similar scheme of the subvariants. And you can see data goes all the way up through mid-December. And you can see here the group with and without the bivalent vaccine and how quickly they diverge there. And so there's no question that you can see here, it dramatically decreases the risk of hospitalization by about 80% and dramatically by about 85% reduces the risk of death. So the vaccine, while not maybe quite as effective against preventing infection as it was against earlier variants, the bivalent vaccine, very effective at preventing severe outcomes. Next slide. Again, some more data from actual efficacy data from the CDC. The risk of laboratory confirmed COVID by hospitalizations is roughly 30 times higher in people who have not been vaccinated at all compared to those who have had the updated bivalent vaccine there. And you can see the dramatic impact in hospitalizations and deaths for this vaccine. Next slide. So that concludes my report. I just want to briefly mention Mpox. Those cases are down to less than once a week, but we still are seeing smoldering cases occasionally. And that has been going on for about 6-8 weeks. Whether we'll get to zero or not, I don't know, but that has dramatically decreased. And then I'll just say there is also an outbreak of varicella in a daycare center in Orange County. And it's all children under 1 who cannot be immunized, eligible for vaccine to 1, but it's just something to be concerned about circulating in the community. thank you, and I'm happy, as will Amir, to answer any of your questions. Oh, I should say,
Yeah, that
Orange County, by the way, I should say, our plan at the hospital is if Orange County goes to a high level of community level of COVID for 2 weeks, then we reintroduce masking in non-patient care areas. We continue masking in all patient care areas. We only met that criterion for 1 week, and although we plan to implement a masking in the non-patient areas due to the decrease to a moderate level, we have not implemented that change. Thank you.
And just one quick moment to address to the outpatient therapeutics that are readily available now. So a little bit different every semester. You know, you might hear me say we have a little bit different starting point and a little different landscape. Right now, our accessibility and availability for our outpatient treatment options, i.e. Paxlovid and Molnupiravir, continues to be at a point of where we aren't meeting pinch points in pharmacies. Like we did at the very beginning, we have system-wide methods to be able to do that, and then expanded to now also the test and treat centers that are across the state as well. So there's more readily available supply. The EUA, just as of December 26th, for Paxlovid was actually downgraded from the age of 65 and older to 50 and older as being a concern for high risk of progression. So again, including more and more people into the bucket of who is eligible to receive treatment.
Thank you. Is this one working? Okay. Are there any questions for David or Amir? Audrey Pettifor on Zoom.
Hi, thank you, David and Amir. I am a strong proponent of Paxlovid. I think particularly given, I have a lot of colleagues recently who've gotten COVID and say, well, I have a mild case, on day 2, let's say. And I think the data on the potential of long COVID, working with the long COVID recovery clinic in the state and having seen the impact on young, healthy people is really profound. And I wonder if you have comments on thoughts about Paxlovid, because I've heard a lot of general practitioners in the community are not recommending it, even for people who are over the age of 50 or may have like one mild have a risk factor, even if they're not, what we might think of as really high risk for hospitalizations. I wonder if you all could comment on that.
I have a strong feeling that we are underusing Paxlovid, and I personally would like to see the FDA release it for all use and leave it up to clinical judgment about it. The drug does have a number of drug interactions, but the drug itself, if you don't have that drug interaction, is very safe, really a metallic taste in the mouth and maybe a little occasional diarrhea. One of the problems with that idea is, well, let me see how sick I get, is with all antivirals, they work best when used early. So for influenza, you only have 48 hours from the onset of symptoms, not test positivity, for the drugs really to be most effective, and for Paxlovid 5 days. So the idea that I'm going to just wait a few more days and see how I am is not the correct approach with the viral. There is some rebound, but it's in the 3 to 7% range. So say roughly a 1 in 20 chance. And the EUA does allow retreating those people with rebound. And the data is quite clear, even real world effectiveness, it dramatically reduces hospitalizations and deaths. And again, we're losing 500 people a day to COVID, although you don't see any of that in the news, 2 jumbo jets every day. And the new data quite conclusively show that it reduces many of the symptoms of long COVID, as well as reduces that risk of heart attack and stroke 30 and 90 days later. So I think we're underutilizing it. I favor broadening the criteria and more widespread use. And really, we have not seen resistance to this or any of the other antiviral drugs developed.
Yeah, and just to piggyback off of what David said, I think that moment on the 26th was kind of a point in kind of tipping, because it had been at 65 and older for such a long period of time, and then to drop it down, 15 years of age. I think more and more as the data comes forward, especially like David had mentioned in those studies of the improvement and potential prevention of long COVID and long COVID symptoms, that's going to be added into kind of the articulation of the risks, benefits, and side effects of why to take or not to take Paxlovid going forward for providers. So I hear you, Audrey. I think in the past we were kind of tightly operating under the confines of not having a lot of this medication available. Now it's more readily available, and it's looking like there's better benefit down the line. So I do encourage those who have mild to moderate symptoms that, and as David said, you really don't want to continue to progress. It's, let's get you on the board as soon as possible to be able to get it.
And the only thing I would add to that, the home tests, if you have symptoms and they're positive, you almost certainly have COVID. But the home test can be negative for the first 2 days of COVID. So somebody who has symptoms, even on day 2 and tests negative, should not consider themselves as necessarily being uninfected with COVID. A PCR test would be clearly highly accurate, but the home tests are not until at least day 3.
All right, I see Eric Muller on Zoom, and then I'll check the room.
Hello there. First of all, seeing you both and hearing your voices today reminds me of how dependent we were on your information and guidance and wisdom when things were really, really hard on this campus. And so I just wanted to say thank you. I mean, it's nice to see you both in a situation where it doesn't feel like a crisis like it did for so long. I have 2 questions. One of them is about long COVID, and the other one is about boosters. So the long COVID question is, first, I'm wondering whether you know and can share any data about the rough percentage of people who get COVID and then develop long COVID, like as a ratio. And also, you mentioned that vaccination status is a strong indicator of that. Are there other factors that we're figuring out? And then the last question is, I think many people on this campus, I've gotten, when I'm told to get my vaccination, I get it. When I'm told to get my booster, I get it. It's now been 4 or 5 months or whatever since I had the bivalent booster. And so I'm kind of wondering, can we anticipate that we're going to have to continue every twice a year or something to be, will it be recommended, do you think, that we continue boosting?
Well,
That's it.
Start off with your long COVID question. Since the definitions are not commonly accepted and they're varied and the patient populations are different, we don't have an absolute number, but somewhere between 15 and 80% of people will have long COVID symptoms, meaning symptoms that persist, and again, depends on the definition, for 8 or 12 weeks, that persist for at least 30 days. Probably 30 to 50% reasonable when you've done those studies. The numbers decrease with time, but clearly some people have symptoms lasting more than a year. John Barata, one of our physical medicine rehab doctors, runs a long COVID clinic at UNC, which is the first and largest in North Carolina, and has already taken care of more than 1,500 patients. So if you, friends, colleagues, I would certainly encourage you to call him. In general, there are 3 risk factors for long COVID: older age, comorbidities, other underlying diseases, and severity of illness, and they're probably additive, and those increase the risk. That said and done, you can have a very mild disease and still end up with long COVID. Your risk is just reduced compared to those risk factors, and some may be fairly mild, a little bit of rash, but others include such things as called brain fog and increased cardiovascular problems, respiratory problems, kidney failure, and others. And it's truly heterogeneous, and that's why at the long COVID clinic you would get screened by our physical medicine team, but then they have automatic referrals depending on your symptoms to pulmonary cardiology, neuropsychology, and others. Again, vaccines and Paxlovid decrease that risk of long COVID. There are not yet any really recommended approved therapies for specific syndromes. So it's really just looking at what the underlying disease is and providing it. There's a lot of research going on here and other places in terms of long COVID. In terms of the vaccines, I get asked that question. We're about 4 months into the bivalent vaccine. When will they recommend you get a second one, if at all? Will it be 6 months, 9 months, or a year? I had this conversation with CDC last week, and they don't know. But my expectation in the long run, Pfizer, Moderna leading the way, are working on developing a combined mRNA flu COVID vaccine. And my guess is that I'm not sure it'll be available for this next flu season, but probably for the one after. And at that point, you'll get your flu shot and the latest COVID variant as well there. So that's, I think, where we're going with the vaccines. But right now, there is no recommendation for a second bivalent booster, and that's the only boosters that are currently available. So there are no monovalent boosters available in the U.S. Did I answer all your questions, or did
You
I?
sure did. Thank you.
But my pleasure.
Are there any further questions? Arlene?
Hi, David, Amir, Arlene Sanya from Medicine. So I think there's still a little bit of confusion regarding when you can return to work. As we know from the CDC, after COVID, you stay in isolation for 5 days, and then you can actually go out of isolation and wear a mask. It's encouraged until day 10 or through day 10, if you're going to be around anyone who's immunocompromised, potentially. So I think there isn't as much clarity on the occupational health side, because I know they're no longer doing those calls. So can you just clarify for the group, essentially what's your current recommendation? Because we all know that rapid antigen tests can also remain positive for quite a period of time. So there's a little bit of, wordsmithing, I think, on the CDC's website about that. So I think that's important for us to also recognize that testing is not recommended before, removing the mask.
Right. Yeah. So that's a really good question. And Arlene, I appreciate that. I think that there's two different environments that we have to think about, because our occupational health team at the hospital may take a different approach based off of staffing for hospitalized patients and people working in a healthcare atmosphere versus general public recommendations, which would fall under most of us at the university that are not working in healthcare atmospheres. So the general recommendation from the CDC that we've been kind of sticking with from the get-go has been following that time to treat and time of disease to isolation, as opposed to the test to negative in isolation. So what that means is that your onset of symptoms or your first day of a positive test, if you're asymptomatic, is considered day 0. You isolate for 5 days from there. And then for the next 5 days, you wear a mask if you're out in public or in areas of high congregation and or around immunocompromised people. So that's the general recommendation that is given in terms of it being consistent with what's written with the CDC at this point. Now, that's one of the major caveats there that I think is really important. Is it's a great general recommendation. The tail end of that recommendation also says that your symptoms have to be improving and that you have to be fever free. And so while it's a general recommendation, it may not capture every single person that falls into that window. So I always recommend, you speak to your physician or your provider that's taking care of you to understand your relative risk and how your disease is progressing and where you are in that for those isolation recommendations.
All right. Again, I want to thank you both very much for joining us today. I think you're far flung. I can't remember where David is, but I know it's somewhere that's not North Carolina. I appreciate you joining us today. And I'd like to ask everyone to join me in appreciating these folks for. Okay. Thank you. And now if we can get the screen back onto the room so that everyone can see, because I know everyone's going to see what we have to do next, which is we have the wonderful annual celebration and presentation of the 2022 Thomas Jefferson Award. And I'll turn it over to the Chancellor for this part.
I also just want to say a huge thank you to Dr. Barzan and Dr. Weber for bringing their expertise on many occasions. Eric Miller said it best. I think that we are very fortunate to have the world-class faculty, scientists, researchers, clinicians that we have here at Carolina. So thank you for that update on COVID-19. I'm thinking that we're approaching soon, in about 5 weeks, the 3-year anniversary of my convening a group of leaders into the South Building, which included at that time Faculty Chair Lloyd Kramer and Secretary of the Faculty Vince Stepanidis, and said that we were going to within just a few days go entirely remote. And I remember Lloyd looking at me like I had 4 eyes and 6 ears, and he said, "We can't do that. How are we?" He said, "How many of our faculty have taught online?" Amy Hertel's back there nodding her head. She was in the room. And I said, actually, we can do this. There are actually 14% of our faculty had taught an online class, and that we were going to teach the other 86% how to do it. And we did it. And but fortunately, we are back in what I like to call normal school right now. And so thank you for all of you for helping us to get to where we are today. But it is with great pleasure that I begin today by announcing this year's winner of the Thomas Jefferson Award. This award was established in 1961 by the Robert Earl McConnell Foundation, and it's presented annually to that member of the academic community who, through personal influence and performance of duty in teaching, writing, and scholarship, has best exemplified the ideals of democracy, freedom, and education. And this year's winner is Dr. Jeffrey Sayre McCord of the Department of Philosophy. Dr. Sayre McCord is the Moorhead Kane Alumni Distinguished Professor and Director of UNC's very popular Philosophy, Politics, and Economic program, our PP&E program. Jeff is a fantastic teacher, researcher, and leader on our campus. And Jeff has served our university's mission of teaching, research, and service faithfully. And I have valued, Jeff, your wisdom and commitment of higher education over the years. And I most enjoy those walks around campus that you and I have enjoyed on many occasions over the past few years. Jeff will walk by my office and he does this, which means, "Do you have time for a walk?" And we've done it on many occasions, and I have always valued that. And I hope that we'll continue to do that in the years to come. And so I want to now invite Dr. Sayre McCord to the front. I want to invite Professor Mark Lang, who will read the citation. So Jeff and Mark, please come forward. You have a citation?
No.
Your
Oh, my
remarks.
remarks. Oh, I see. All right. Well, Jeff has been a member of our department since 1985. I could tell you something about Jeff's world-renowned research into moral theory, David Hume, Adam Smith, and metaethics. Or I could tell you about how in 2015, Jeff founded, as Kevin mentioned, Carolina's program in philosophy, politics, and economics, which has quickly grown to be one of our most popular minors and has been a prototype for many of the other PPE programs that have since been founded across the country. Or I could tell you about how almost 20 years ago, Jeff brought into existence UNC's Parr Center for Ethics, which is our campus hub for inquiry into and discussion of ethical questions. Or I could tell you how in 2012, Jeff launched the National High School Ethics Bowl, which is headquartered here in Carolina, and which now annually energizes literally thousands of high school philosophers through its 34 regional high school ethics bowls, culminating in the National Bowl held in Chapel Hill, and which has also served as a model for national ethics bowls in other countries. Or I could tell you about Jeff's contributions as chair of the philosophy department for 10 years, as founder and leader of the National PPE Society, and in a range of other roles. But none of that would adequately convey Jeff's irrepressible vitality, warmth, wit, and sheer talent as an inspiring teacher and philosophical interlocutor. To get any sense of those qualities, you would have to do what Kevin does, which is to take a stroll with Jeff across the campus on a warm spring Carolina afternoon and watch students alter their paths in order to greet Jeff. And you'd have to watch as he remembers every student's name and what they're interested in and what they were up to when they last spoke, perhaps years earlier. Or you would have to go to an optional student review session for one of Jeff's legendary introductory ethics courses and see that some of the students there are not currently enrolled in the course, but had taken it many semesters earlier. And they're attending the review session now in order to have one more opportunity to experience Jeff in the classroom. Or you yourself would have to experience Jeff in the classroom, working through with his students one of his provocative vignettes drawn from his own experiences, perhaps illustrating the disparity of power or the pain of misplaced faith or our responsibility for our own beliefs and actions. Jeff has described philosophy as, quote, a contact sport. You can't do it without bumping up against ideas, taking hold of them, and testing their mettle. So I work to engage students actively and reflectively with ideas. And my aim is to give students the tools they need to appreciate, challenge, evaluate, and refine their ideas about how to live, what is worth accomplishing, and how the world works, unquote. That's precisely the kind of education that Jefferson believed people must have in order for our experiment in self-government to succeed. I'm immensely pleased and proud to introduce my colleague and friend, the winner of this year's Thomas Jefferson Award, Jeffrey Sayre McCoy.
Like so many faculty members, I usually talk in 50-minute chunks. I'm not going to do that now. I know there's a lot of important business to be done, but I want to express my thanks to the faculty here at UNC that make it such a pleasure and an honor to be among the faculty, to be here over the decades teaching student after student and feeling like we're making a huge difference to their lives and to the quality of life in North Carolina and much more broadly. It's an honor to receive this award, and it's an honor to be here at Carolina. Thank you very much.
Again, congratulations, Jeff. So I hope that you have all had a wonderful, restful holiday break and that you're off to a great start to 2023. And I want to just share a few updates and thoughts as we do begin this new semester. We are now in finishing up week 2, which is hard to believe, but I'm very excited about where we're headed as a university as we work to fulfill our mission as a leading global public research university. Could not be happier with where we are right now with our new general education curriculum, the Ideas in Action curriculum, which was officially launched this past fall. It's been great to hear from students. I love getting around campus and sometimes on those walks with Jeff to talk to students about their favorite class, their favorite professor, what is it that they're challenged by, or what are the opportunities out in front of them that they're looking forward to latching on to. And I will tell you that the launch of the new curriculum has been immensely successful. And I know that we will begin preparing to, for some adjustments to that over the next several months, but it could not be happier. Again, I think it's so focused on experiential education, creating that foundation in the first year with our new III courses, the expansion of the first year seminar and the Thrive courses that I think are going to set us apart from our peers. We're also focused on our strategic plan, Carolina Next, Innovations for Public Good. You've heard me talk about it often. And as I mentioned, at least on 2 occasions this past fall, that we're really focused this year on 3 of those strategic initiatives. The first around enabling career development for faculty, staff, and students. The second around promoting democracy. And the third around ensuring that we at Carolina will always be a research and innovation powerhouse, something that allows us to remain a top 5 public university. We're planning to send a survey out to our deans on initiatives, on those initiatives to see how we can best move us forward, not just as a university, but the individual schools and departments within them. And so we have discussed this with our deans right at the end of the semester. And so be on the lookout for that survey so that we can, again, fulfill that mission and stay true to what we've put on paper with the strategic plan. Just a few thoughts and highlights, though, on the democracy initiative. We have formed a new committee on academic freedom and free speech. This committee will advise me and the provost and other members of our leadership team and give ideas for advancing academic freedom and articulating free speech norms and best practices within our committee. We're going to be working, Professor Christopher Lundberg from our communications department will be chairing that committee. I want to thank Chris for agreeing to lead the team. Cameron Farwell, our vice chancellor for communications, alongside a few others on our leadership team, will be by their side on this journey, and I'm grateful for each of them for their service on this. And the committee is comprised of several faculty members, staff, and 2 of our student leaders, and more to come on that. We'll be charging that committee next week. Regarding career development, one of the reasons why I was a little late getting here is I was charging a new committee around career development. The goal is to consider the essential career and personal development experiences that our Carolina students need for life beyond UNC. There's a campus message in your inbox on this very topic where I talk about preparing our students for careers and jobs that don't even yet exist. If you think about this year's graduating class, while they'll be graduating in 2023, they won't be retiring from their careers until about 2073. What jobs and careers will exist in the year 2073? And we have to be thinking about that as we prepare them for their career journey. So the goal again is to really prepare them for these essential skills and experiences that they'll need beyond Carolina. Again, really pleased with where we are. There are also some alumni that are on this committee, and a few Board of Trustees members that are passionate about this. This semester, as you know, we are awaiting the outcome of the Supreme Court case, and I've been asked about this in several of my advisory committee meetings of late. And as I mentioned late last fall, we will probably not know the outcome of that Supreme Court case until probably mid to late May at the earliest, more likely mid to late June. And I just want to thank Rachel Feldman, our Vice Provost for Enrollment, and the 8-member committee comprised of several faculty members and some members of her admissions team that have been convening regularly to prepare for whatever the outcome may be of that Supreme Court case. As I've said repeatedly, we are committed to building a diverse class each year and to ensure that we have a diverse student body that we know allows our students to thrive and to such that everyone can benefit from the educational benefits that we know diversity brings inside the classroom and in those experiential education opportunities. The last thing I'll bring up is that I mentioned at the last meeting that we launched our Next Grand Challenges initiative, and that this is leveraging the amazing success that we had of our recently completed $5 billion capital campaign. We had a wonderful celebration on November the 18th at the Eddie Smith Fieldhouse, where we had, and I think the highlight of the night were the students who presented that evening, where they had a chance to talk about the impact that fellowship, scholarship, and aid has had on their journeys here at Carolina. And we have our development team has a brief video clip of the highlights of that evening. And I think if you have a chance to see it, you will agree that it's the students who stole the show that evening. But this new Grand Challenge initiative will highlight several areas that align with our priorities at Carolina to help us reach out to donors as we bridge this past campaign with the next campaign. And I look forward to welcoming Michael Andreasen, our new Vice Chancellor for Development. Michael will start on Monday, the 23rd of January. He drove across the country from Oregon over the past 5 days, and he told me last night, he texted, he said, "I'm here, and I'm here to stay because I don't want to have to make that trek again." It was a long journey. And then the last thing, I said that was the last thing, but we are completing a few other searches. A Vice Chancellor for library, Vice Provost for libraries, and our Dean for the School of Government searches are just about complete. And we hope to make some announcements within the next week on that. And I also just want to commend Dean Fawad Abdal Khalik from our School of Education. because he is working tirelessly on the initiative that we discussed last semester and last spring, which was to launch a lab school up in Person County. And that lab school is making a real difference in the lives of those elementary school students up in Person County. We're going to expand that out down to Chatham County over the next year. And if you followed any of the news coming out of the Board of Governors meeting this past week, the National Assessment of Education Progress Study found that 68% of North Carolina's fourth graders scored below proficient in reading. And the Board of Governors and President Hans has asked that all of our schools of education across the system really step up to be sure that we are doing our part in placing high quality teachers in our elementary schools such that that percentage can increase over the next several years. And I just want to thank Fawad and his faculty in the School of Education. We did score in the good range in that study, but good is not good enough for us, and we're going to continue to work hard on that. So I just wanted to thank Fawad. With that, I am going to turn it over to Provost Clemens for some updates, and then we're happy to take some questions as we have, as time permits, Jill. Thank you.
If you'd like it. Okay.
Fine. Yeah, I think I'll be brief today. I'm happy for the opportunity to be here. As I've said, every time I talk to you, the work that you do and that we do together is crucially important. Faculty governance matters to all of us, and I've made advocating for our rights and privileges as faculty my guiding purpose and principle. You may also get tired of hearing me say this, but I see my primary charge as advocate in chief for the faculty because empowering, serving, and responding to the faculty is, as I see it, the best way to advance the mission of the university and to serve our students in our state. Just a few updates. First, on Sunday, we will wrap up our celebration of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Week with Unity Cafe. Ours is the longest standing collegiate celebration of King's life and legacy. We've had a series of great events, including a memorial banquet on Sunday, yes, a day of service, and the MLK Awards ceremony and lecture with an inspiring oration by attorney Ben Crump, who represented the families of Trayvon Martin, Michael Brown, and George Floyd. It was very well attended. Our students participated. We also heard from the poet laureate of Chapel Hill. It was overall a very great event. These have all been fitting tributes, but each of them also points us toward doing the hard work of grappling with our history and with our present. In support of this work, the College of Arts and Science has rolled out their new DEI strategic plan, Action Steps for Equity, led by Senior Associate Dean for Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion, Carla Slocum. There was a roundtable this week for staff and faculty, and we look forward to seeing that plan unfold. We've also made diversity of every kind a priority in staffing the Provost office, recruiting academics and administrators for leadership positions that not only represent our campus, but increase the diversity in our community of leaders, and crucially, the leadership pipeline on campus. We're proud to have an incredibly capable team that changes the traditional face of leadership at UNC. As I look ahead to the semester, there are an emerging set of conversations on campus that will be interesting to follow. I believe the artificial intelligence era has arrived in earnest with the advent of a new oracle on the internet called ChatGPT. While our faculty explore its capabilities, they're beginning to see the opportunities and the threats it represents to the academic enterprise. My office is tuning into these concerns and considering the best way to engage in deliberations about a future in which machines can generate at least C-level creative work, and they will certainly get better with time. Finally, last item, a resolution has come over the horizon from the Board of Governors that attempts to address the issue of compelled speech. We don't know what final form this may take or whether it will even be adopted, but I know it will be the subject of many productive conversations in the faculty, including, I understand, next week at the FEC. At the center of these conversations, not to forget, is the bedrock principle of academic freedom. This is an issue the Chancellor's office and the Provost's office are passionate about, and I know from the prior discussions and resolutions of this council, the faculty are passionate about it too. What I want to say at this point is I'm confident that with your input and guidance, we can pursue our shared goal of creating a place of inclusion and belonging while upholding our commitment to academic freedom. Now we can take questions.
I'm reading this here because I wrote this out. So my question relates to academic freedom and diversity and inclusion. So I just heard both of you talk about these real true commitments that we have to building inclusive spaces, the importance of diversity in the classroom. But I'm kind of concerned about the news coming out of the Board of Governors this week. And I'm wondering if the Board of Governors passes the proposed code change regarding a prohibition on political speech during hiring and enrollment processes, do we as a school or individual departments have any options to maintain independence regarding the questions we ask during these processes? For example, asking a well-informed question related to fostering inclusion can really help us build the place that we are and say we are about having diverse classrooms where students from all backgrounds can thrive. And so I'm nervous that not being able to ask that question puts us at a disservice. I'm also nervous because I teach DEI courses. It's a part of my job. And that's why I know these questions matter. And I'm feeling concerned that if we go the way of Florida or other spaces where speech in the name of academic freedom, we stop having academic freedom, I won't be able to have those conversations in my classrooms. So if, for example, I were to assign students sides on a conversation related to a DEI related topic that may be considered a social topic, I don't know the law. Is it possible that at some point the Board of Governors can say, I can no longer do that assignment or teach my class altogether? I know that was like 3 different questions, but it's truly coming from a sense of nervousness about what all of this means for how we continue building the diversity and inclusion we know.
Yeah, so thank you for the question, and I'll jump in and then ask Chris to add any further commentary. I spoke with President Hans about this morning in a meeting, a phone call that I had with him on a few other topics, and I really believe that he was in making an effort to be proactive here. We are seeing what's happening around the country in other states. And this does not in any way prevent you from teaching your class in the way that you want to teach the class. It has nothing to do with the classroom environment. To your first question about questions that you might ask in a candidate in an interview, I believe that asking questions around their own lived experiences that help you to form an opinion about how they might contribute to the academic climate of your department or school is likely appropriate. I don't think that it's prohibiting that, but I know that they are the policy, as I understand it, and as Provost just said, we don't know that it may be revised. We don't know if it will pass, and as it's currently posed, but it's just asking that we are not requiring someone on an application or in an interview to respond, to questions of, I think it was around the current political. Yeah. I think in an interview, setting, I would think that would be appropriate. But again, I want to see what the, what the final proposal and what ultimately is passed. And you're invited, he has invited faculty and staff from around the system to provide input and suggested that be done through the faculty assembly chair. I don't know if you.
Yeah, I'll just say a little more. The guardians and the bulwark of academic freedom, in my mind, are you, the faculty. And so I think we do need to be having a conversation about what we would assert we need to do to protect academic freedom here. And that needs to be a visible conversation that people engage in. And I want to listen to that and try to assemble from that the norms that we want to protect on this campus under any policy that comes, right? I think we should be defining what we want to do and understanding that that is part of academic freedom and asserting our right to do it under whatever policy comes out. But I don't know that we all have a common understanding of what that is. And that's okay, but we do need to hear about it, because if we have to make judgments, it needs to have been discussed. One of the things I also keep saying, and sorry to keep repeating, I use this word subsidiarity. My philosophy is not a top-down governance structure, though that has to be the case sometimes with codes. It is a bottom-up structure where the faculty set the norms of academic freedom, maybe even adjacent to one another in departments that have a slightly different culture in different ways. That's the kind of community I think we are and need to remain. And so I really think it's a good chance for us to spend these next couple of weeks having a conversation which we can summarize in public, so that leadership, President Hans, the trustees, the governors, can see our thoughts on the matter. I think this body, not much time because you meet again only one time, but I think this body can play a role in that. But more importantly, the faculty collectively can play a role. And I'm happy to be engaged in that, listening and receiving from you advice, whether individually or collectively. So really, thanks for your question. And we are fully engaged on this. Yeah.
Eric Muller's on Zoom with a question.
Yes, hello. I'm the voice from on high, it seems, today. I have one comment and a question. The comment is partly in response to the Chancellor's statement a moment ago about the idea that this new proposal for a rule about compelled speech is something that would prevent us from requiring somebody's opinion on political matters or social action, whatever that is. And the thing I'm concerned about, one of the things I'm concerned about it is that it actually stretches beyond requirement. It says that we're not allowed to require or solicit opinions from people on political matters, and soliciting something is different from requiring it. Soliciting something means simply asking for it, so the way I understand it, we could have an application for a position that asks 5 questions, and they can choose whichever one they want to respond to. And if one of those touches on opinion on political matters, we're still soliciting, even though they could not answer it and still get the job. So I'm very concerned about that soliciting idea. And I hope as the discussions continue that we can pay some attention to that. I was really happy to hear about the creation of this new committee that was mentioned on speech and academic freedom. And you mentioned that there would be some faculty members on it, or that there are some faculty members. I was wondering if you could tell us who the faculty members are that will be serving.
The committee will be charged, Cameron, is it next Monday or Tuesday? As soon as the committee is charged, and that's coming up very soon, I see Christy looking at the calendar, we will, it'll be posted. The faculty composition will be posted. It is predominantly faculty. It's mostly faculty and some staff, and two student leaders, a graduate student and an undergraduate student. And again, I think this, I shared that with President Hans this morning, that we are about to charge this new committee, and he said that committee may be a group that we want to engage in providing some feedback, on this proposed policy. And I would encourage those of you that have thoughts and ideas to provide that input through the faculty assembly. Well, if there are no other questions, we'll move on.
Okay, I'm not seeing any on Zoom.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Incredibly, we're ahead of schedule. I don't recall that happening before.
In my time as secretary, but I believe that Cameron Farwell is here. There you are. Yes. Okay. So, Cameron Farwell has been Carolina's Vice Chancellor of Communication since late September, and she came to us from the University of Missouri. I believe that you were briefly introduced to Faculty Council this fall. I know that I have seen you in attendance at our meetings, so I know you've been here and have probably met a lot of the folks in the room, but we wanted to have Cameron join us here today for a more formal opportunity to introduce herself and the work she's undertaking. And as I understand it, Helena is going to be driving your slides, and you may have whichever. Oh, no, you're driving your own slides. I'm sorry. Okay, I'll get this. We have this for you.
Okay,
They will
perfect.
show up there and you can have the microphone of your choice.
This one to the right, okay.
Yes.
Very good. Can you all hear me? Oh, great. Well, before I get started, and this is a pretty short deck, just want to introduce who I am and where I came from. I was a journalist for 18 years before I went into University Communications and finished my career in journalism at the Dallas Morning News. And that's where I was education department head, which essentially meant I led the news report across Texas in terms of higher education, but also K-12 and national issues. And from there, I went to the University of Texas at Dallas, and then University of Pittsburgh, and then University of Missouri, and now I'm here, and this is my last stop, hopefully. But it's been a great journey, and I've been here since September, so this is my 4th month. And it's just a real honor to be here at this university. A lot of people asked me why I wanted to move to North Carolina. My family's in California. And I said, because it's an honor to work at an institution like this. For someone like me, it gives me an awful lot of good stories to tell. And so we've begun to start thinking about what we might do at this stage of communications at UNC-Chapel Hill. So I wanted to share some of our early work and thoughts about what we might be able to do next. And I'd also like to talk about our work in support of the faculty so that you all know the work that we do there. So my office, these are all of our different functions, and I apologize to the executive group who's seen a few of these slides before when we got together. But we have a lot of different functions under us that you might not realize. We have all the institutional channels and communications. A lot of times people think of the emails, they think of social media, but there's an awful lot of communication that happens in all the different ways. And if you think about how you receive information in your life, it comes from everywhere. It comes from events you go to, it comes from social media, it comes from digital marketing, it comes from a website, everything. So we're trying to surround you with all of the messaging so that we can get to you as an audience, a key audience for us, but also all of our other stakeholder audiences. So this is a little bit about what my crew does, but they do the photography. We have somebody in the back taking pictures. They do videography, they do the website, they do the social media. Our social media channels, when you put them together, is 1 million people. That's larger circulation than we ever had at the Dallas Morning News. So after 4 months, these are some areas we'd like to focus on in our division. And sharpening our public messages. I think every university I've worked at, there's always a struggle to sharpen your messages down to a few. Because whenever you ask a university community to tell you all the things that are important to talk about, you've got a very long list. And so when you're about a lot of things, it's hard to be known for something. And so we're really looking at what are the true differentiators for UNC-Chapel Hill, and are we banging those drums as loud as we can? And so we're looking at those areas that we really want to talk more about. And for an outsider, sometimes what I find is that for people who have been at a place for a long time, there's a sense of, oh yeah, we do that. But it's still extraordinary that we do that. And what's the latest in that area? So I'm not taking anything for granted. And then enhancing the storytelling. I think we have a lot of tools in communications, and multi-platform, meaning not just words, but video, photographs, podcasts. We have a lot of creative ways to tell stories and grab attention. So I want to make sure that we're doing that in the best way possible. We also want to make sure we're finding the best stories. So one of the things we found is we have communicators all throughout the university who work in the various schools who you probably deal with in your schools. And then we have central comms, but how are we getting to all the best stories that we could be telling about research, but also about the personal stories that you hear about all over campus, about amazing things people are doing, the student stories, the staff stories. And then we're also taking a look at the way we communicate. So
what are all the channels that we have? How are they working? How is our staff situated? Are we focused in the right direction? So whenever you have a change in leadership, it's a time to think about that. What are we doing and is it working? And it's also really important in university communications to always be evolving. So during the pandemic, I remember that day we had to evolve very fast. I remember talking to my staff at Mizzou and saying, okay, everything you're working on, that's all changing today. You have to adapt. And even outside of the pandemic, you have to sort of evolve with the needs of the institution. So we're looking at how we do that. One of the things we want to do is narrow in those messages that I was talking earlier about. What do we want to talk about the most, and what do we want the world to know about us in those spaces? So a lot of times we say, I just wish the legislature understood this better about the university. So if you articulate what those things are, and then you use the power of all the communicators across campus to reinforce that message, then people begin to know it. It's all things that are true about the university. We want to pick the things that truly tell the Carolina story and that we can prove up every day in the stories that we tell. And this is, I talked about this earlier, there's a lot of different ways we communicate, and these are just a few, and my folks think about all of them. And so you really need to create a surround sound to actually deliver a message to people, because everybody picks things up differently. They watch TV or they look at email. Some people don't look at email. So you really have to think about all the different ways. And when we have a message, we usually have a plan with 15 different ways we're going to distribute it. I talked about the audit. This is the part I wanted to spend some time on, is a lot of what our team thinks about is how we give visibility to the work of the faculty, not just in research, also other kinds of scholarship. We want to provide that visibility for what you're doing. That's the magic here. That's why the students come here. So a lot of our time and effort is spent on that. So we currently promote research on unc.edu, which is also distributed across social media channels. That's the homepage, which switches out different stories each day. And then we also have the well. And then to get into those, typically the best way to start someone knowing about your story is to talk to your communicator in your school or unit. And then we get with them and look to amplify that news across the institutional channels. So the best way is to start with your unit communicator, but we're also trying to reach a little deeper into all the schools to make sure we're not leaving any good stories left untold. We also do media relations for the whole university. So we pitch experts from our university all the time. We take a look at what is happening in the news and who our experts are, and we pitch those folks. We also pitch stories to the national media. So this is something that we spend a good deal of time on. And if you can be available, and a lot of times the media will call and they need someone in 2 hours. So if that is something that you can at least have us give you a try on, let us know if that's something you would be available for, and we'd love to have you in our log of folks to call. We also offer media training, and this media training it can be for speaking with the media. It can also be for speaking with large groups. Largely, this training focuses on how to make your research or your scholarship translatable to a lay audience. And there's a lot of good tips in this, and I've heard rave reviews about our media training. So please take advantage of that. And we can do that for small groups as well. Then there's one more plug I need to make. We have a really great resource on our campus. It's called the Carolina News Studio. And this is a partnership between our office and the Hussman School of Journalism. And what this is a professional studio that can connect directly to media outlets. And it's a very high level transmission, so it's nice quality. And as much as everybody loved the Zoom interviews, we're we're seeing media go back to wanting higher quality communications. So pre-pandemic, our studio was quite, it had a lot of activity with our experts talking to national and local state media. We saw a real dip during the pandemic, and we're ready for business. So we're hoping that if you get a call from media or you think you can be helpful expert and we can connect you with media, this is a great opportunity to spend a few minutes in there and really give visibility to your work. It's open 24/7. So, and we can scurry within a very short period of time. Here's one of our experts in the top corner. He's a constitutional law expert who's done a lot of work with us. And you can see the quality that we can have in the studio. It looks a lot better than a Zoom. And here's the best part. We have a designated parking spot that is there for you to swoop in and be ready for an interview very quickly. And the only people who get to park there are the people who are using the studio. So we make it as convenient as possible, but we would love to promote your work through this. And this is available to any faculty who are transmitting to a media outlet. So that is the end of my formal talk, but I am happy to take any questions you may have.
Would you mind going to the mic so that the folks who are on Zoom can hear you, and remember to introduce yourself and et cetera.
My name is Sridhar Balasubramanian. Everybody, including my daughter, calls me Dr. B.
Dr. B, I can remember that.
Welcome to UNC. So I was struck by your second point about storytelling, and I'm a big believer in strategic storytelling. It's a great way to build an organizational culture. But the problem is often, even at a place like Carolina, which is just brimming with great stories about students, faculty, staff, the institution, if these stories are not institutionalized, they recede into the dusty corridors of our organization.
I agree.
And so one idea I have, which you may want to consider, is I've often wished for a Carolina storybook, which contains the absolutely best of all our stories across schools, across faculty, staff, etc. And that should be something that is given to every new student at Carolina, every new employee at Carolina, so that it anchors them into who we are, what we value. And the first thing they're given is the storybook, not HR papers. That can follow next. Right?
Yeah.
So I'd be absolutely delighted if your team could come up with something like that, and we could.
Yeah, we'll throw that around. I do think that there's opportunity in one thing I've done in other places is if you do have a digital channel, that you have a searchable archive of all those stories, so that if you want to read all the research stories or you want to read all the personal stories, they're archived there for you. But I like your idea as well to kind of package it up.
Even be it just a digital stories of Carolina, great stories.
Exactly. Yeah.
There's a question on Zoom. How do we find out who is our school communicator? And I believe the questioner is in the College of Arts and Science.
Send me an email. Send me an email and I'll make sure that you know who's available to you there. They have a few people. Huh? Okay. She their leader. Oh, Geneva Collins. I'm still learning all the different communicators, but.
This is Christina Birch. I asked the question. I guess I did mean it more generally, though. I mean, not everyone in the audience is in the college, and they might not know who their school communicator is. But then is the answer to send you an email?
We are making a website for our division. What might be a nice part of that website is to list the lead school communicators as well. So that's a really good idea.
Thanks for clarifying that, Christina. Also on Zoom, hand up from Hugo Mendez. And you're muted. We can't hear you.
My apologies. Yeah, and I wanted to thank you so much for this presentation. I was curious to know, when you get particular inquiries from the media, you talked about trying to define what Carolina's unique identity is. How or what particular media do you think tend to look towards our university? Obviously, I can imagine things in North Carolina, the state itself, but who targets us for potential interviews, or what kind of interests attracts our, the media that reach out to us? I hope that was clear. I apologize.
Who's most interested in us as the media? Is that kind of what the question is?
Yeah, in terms of the kind of interview requests you might get, et cetera.
Oh.
I mean, how do you see us potentially through their eyes?
We have a robust interest from all levels of media. We're a journalism school, so most of our media requests come from student journalists. Missouri was a journalism school too, and journalism's close to my heart, so I like to see them. I like to work with student journalists. So a lot of interest from the students, but we get a fair amount of questions from the News and Observer as the kind of the leading regional. And then this university does draw national attention. We get requests from national media at least every other day or so, because whenever they're doing stories on different issues, they do think of us. So that's a good thing that we are seen among the premier public universities in the country, and they want to know where we fit into the larger issues. So I think the national, where we can do even more if we increase our attention on finding our best stories, is to place the stories about our research even more often in the national media, so that people can see the truly exceptional work here. And so the team does focus on making media pitches, and those are very competitive. When you go to pitch a story to the New York Times, you're pitching against every other university in the country. And so we've had a lot of successes there, but we'd like to do more.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Thank you all for this time. Good to see you all.
Thank you for that. And I'm sorry that you were the one who had to learn a lesson that we now know about this room, which is that there's no confidence monitor. What's going on is behind you. So I apologize for that. The next group that's coming up, I do have a laptop here that I can sort of tilt in your direction so in case you want to see what other folks are seeing. Well, like I said, everything is going to be perfect the next time we're in this room. So next up, we do have a presentation from the Educational Policy Committee. This is on the university approved absence policy. You might remember that it was on our December agenda, but we both ran over on that agenda, and also turned out the committee needed a university approved absence for reasons that I don't recall, except that I thought that was funny. So the members of the committee that are approaching, I'm going to let you all introduce yourselves. How about that? So thank you all for coming forward to present this, and you can drive your own slides once they're up. They'll be behind you and on my screen. Oh.
Happy Friday, everyone. I'm Meg Zimrodi from the School of Nursing. Good afternoon. My name is Desiree Rickenberg. I'm the Dean of Students.
And I'm Lorraine Kramer. I'm the chair of the EPC right now, and I'm going to let these two take over for me, and I'll be here for question and answer.
All right, folks, thanks so much for some time with you all today. We are here to be able to do the things that are up on the slides, right? So we're going to, our main aim is to be able to raise a little bit of awareness regarding the University Approved Absence Office, and be able to talk a little bit about the class attendance policy. They are together, but at the same time, a little bit different. Want to be able to make sure you all have some information about that. hoping to be able to address some common misconceptions about the class attendance policy and a little bit about the University Approved Absence Office that we have heard from faculty and that we hear feedback from students. So this is live information. These aren't things that we just decided outside in the hall to come up with. So, and then last but not least, share resources. We want to be able to let this be the beginning of an ongoing conversation, because whether you are a first-time faculty member or have been here for a long time, I think it's important to recognize that the class attendance policy has been here for a long time in many iterations. The most recent update was done in 2018 and approved by this body. And the University Approved Absence Office actually is really new in the grand scheme of things. So that office was created and launched in September of 2019. And so I think this is a really critical opportunity to be able to start this conversation, because we are really kind of just now back into that full swing of in-person classwork and these current expectations. The common misconceptions that you see up there. Sorry. There we go. Thank you. I appreciate that. The most common misconceptions for faculty that we see. And so when I say we see, I mean the University Approved Absence Office and the Dean of Students Office. So the University Approved Absence Office currently is an office of one person, and they are reviewing requests that are coming in on an ongoing basis. And what we see is a lot of communication from faculty around what they think they should do, or what students think that they should do, or what they've been told. And so the University Approved Absence Office must be present to approve an absence, or University Approved Absence must be present to approve an absence or to receive an accommodation from a faculty member for classwork. That's not true. It is optional to comply with the class attendance policy, and that when it comes to University Approved absences, that is also not true. We have faculty who frequently say that I'm exempt. I don't have to comply with this policy. And then last but not least, among the top of our common misconceptions is that if an absent doesn't get approved, then I cannot accommodate you. So I'm meaning the faculty member. So again, a lot of communication back from faculty saying that I can't do anything for the student because you won't approve their University Approved absence. So, so again, there are a few other things that are in there, but wanted to highlight those top three. And like I said, we're gonna, as we move through, especially the latter part of our presentation, really think about resources, engagement in the future of what this conversation might look like. So I mentioned to you briefly numbers, right? I said I've got one person in the office as a full-time staff member. We do have members in the Office of the Dean of Students team who do provide some additional support, especially as those numbers continue to grow and increase. We are also looking for opportunities to be able to grow, at least in small part, the support that office has. But the numbers up here, you can see they're staggeringly high, right? And the growth, I should say, especially is the piece that we have been keeping a big pulse on. And so we're on track right now to at least meet, probably exceed the numbers that we saw last year in terms of students requesting University Approved absences. I think one of the really interesting data points that I wanted to be able to show you up here, and this kind of highlights those misconceptions and the potential impact on you and our students, is that over 2,500 requests are received, and only 980 of those are actually approved as meeting the criteria that the attendance policy sets forth. So again, the policy is really meant to address a much smaller piece of the overall attendance topic when it comes to students engaging in their classes. The note up there about athletics and COVID, we do handle those separately. Those are different numbers, but we do touch them. And so I think it's important to recognize that these are the ones that are crossing through our hub and our professional staff on a regular basis. But we do frequently work with athletics, and we're working with our partners in campus health and others around COVID-related absences, because that's still a part of what we track as well. So we talk a lot about the numbers, but our data indicate that that these increases could be attributed to lots of reasons. And most of it is what we talked about in that previous slide. It's those misconceptions. It's a lack of clarity on what the policy is. Sometimes it's that it just exists to begin with, and then how to be able to realize that policy and how to implement that for you, and to recognize it's not a one size fits all. What works for one faculty member is not going to work for the same faculty member, even sometimes in the same department, because you're teaching two different classes and have two different pedagogical approaches. And so we want to be able to also recognize that this is very much opportunity for faculty to be able to lead in these spaces within the framework that the policy and procedures lay out. The biggest thing that, if you don't hear me say anything else, is around commonly occurring illnesses. And so when we look at the numbers, the number one reason that we receive university approved absence requests are related to commonly occurring illnesses, things like flu, things like strep, things like a cold. I don't want to doubt or say that those things aren't impactful to students. And I'm not going to say that those students should be in your class. But those are things that students should be reaching out directly to faculty and being able to engage with them in an iterative conversation around what those needs are, how they can continue to make progress, and how they can continue to actively engage in the course. All right. The piece at the very bottom of the slide is all of those kind of issues and concerns also contribute to the delay that's oftentimes experienced by students and sometimes by you all regarding the communication around the response times. And so it is so important and so critical that when students are coming to us, they're coming to us really out of a place that is at a higher critical need. It isn't because a faculty member said, I can't do this unless. It's not because a student is saying that, or it's not because a faculty member feels like they have to have something, a piece of paper from me or the office. So we want to be able to make the responses quick for students. We want you all to get them quickly too, especially when they are critical. There's no need for you to delay, but we also recognize that when we're getting a lot of things that are coming to us that aren't necessary, it does create unnecessary delays and bottlenecks. All right, so when my colleagues that are here, the three of us, also want to be able to really highlight Joy Renner. Joy's done an immense amount of work from like way back, that started like 2017, I think, a whole like listening tour all across campus to be able to bring forward what we were trying to do in terms of the university's approach to class attendance, and to be able to really make sure that we were focusing on what was critical and what was the most important components to be able to address in the university or in the university's class attendance approach. And so this really stems from a need to ensure compliance with laws, regulations, and the policies to promote consistency and practice across the university, right? And so again, the class attendance policy has long been in existence. This update, the 2018 update, was really a clarity document, right? It's an opportunity to really be able to add some additional color to what was very gray. I also want to recognize that there's still a little bit of gray in there, because you can't have a policy that is going to fit 100% of everything that faculty experience and that students experience when it comes to attendance in their classrooms. The updated policy really provides the floor for what's expected for students and for faculty. And it's really important, again, to remember that university approved absences are not required for faculty to be able to work directly with students around their absence needs. Just making sure I hit my highlights. And so students, they do not need to be referred to the university approved absence office or the dean of students office to get their absences approved. And I still want to recognize that you all are hugely compassionate, caring people. Many of you work with students on an individual basis around the clock in so many ways. And so we also want to make sure that you know that you're not out there alone. So if a student does come to you, right, with some issue around attendance, but it also is because of something that is really significant, we still would encourage you to think about how you can support the student through the academic lens and through the classroom lens. But you're always more than welcome to refer the students to the Dean of Students Office through our care referral forms for ongoing support, connections to other university resources, and those types of things. So I do want to really make it clear that we're not trying to set up a wall to say, don't send the Dean of Students Office anything. What we're really trying to do is say, how can we partner with you so that we can support the student in ways that allow them to be successful outside the classroom, and you can support the student in the best ways inside the classroom. All right, so the 3 bullets that are up there under the circumstances considered for UAAs, those are pretty much taken right from the policy. And so if you go into the university's policy website and look up the class attendance, you'll see these. I think maybe the 3rd little paragraph, there are these 3 bullet points. And so it's important to recognize that those 3 bullet points were designed and crafted with a lot of careful consideration around the language. So university approved absences should be reserved for those absence needs that stem from authorized university activities. And so those things are oftentimes like NCAA athletics, you're officially representing the university in those spaces. It could also be a student who is engaging in academic scholarship and presentations that are directly connected to their major and their programs of study. We also point to it really is that framework around the legal compliance components, right? So students may need to be absent for a host of reasons that fit into what the university is required to do as it relates to certain federal guidelines, as well as other university policies. So things like things like ADA, EOC related policies, and being able to think about Title IX, as well as, again, those kind of regulatory framework pieces. And then last but not least, and again, this is where we see the most questions is around that significant health condition, family emergencies. And so so those are the things like the commonly occurring illnesses, which oftentimes get to us, but don't need to, right? COVID is still going to be an excused absence for at least the foreseeable future until something changes. We're going to see students who, if you're hospitalized, right? You're hospitalized, you have an emergency surgery, you have a parent or a close family member that has passed away. Those things kind of rise to that level of immediate attention. And oftentimes they're things that a student actually can't facilitate on their own. Students are required to be able to make sure that they're reporting those things and providing documentation. So know that when you get something from the University Approved Absence Office, it has been vetted. There's attached documentation that is, and it's coming to you through that lens. But more than anything, and this is where I get to turn everything over to my partner over here, Meg, that there are so many things that you as faculty can do.
And with that, educational policy has been working on this for the past year, and it is our work that will continue for this year as well. One of the first things that we're trying to do here is come to faculty council to empower you all with what you can do. And then we're going to have an ask at the end of this, where we're going to be really fancy and put up a QR code where you can sign up to be a champion for your own department and school, because as Desiree has mentioned, it's very specific in each of the schools, and then we want to be sure that we empower you all to do what you can within the constraints of the policy. And so please stay tuned for that. But faculty, you can excuse a student from class and allow makeup work without sending the student to the UAA office, as we've already talked about, where those bottlenecks can occur. Anything that you can do to empower yourself to come up with a plan is great. And then you can excuse a student from class and allow makeup work, even if the student does not have a UAA. And that goes back to some of the reasons. Oh, no, it's still there. Yeah. For why they may or may not need one. And you can devise your own strategy for how makeup work is handled, as long as it meets the minimum standard described by the makeup coursework and assessments part of the policy. And we put the policy at the end of this slide, this slide set as well. So now I'm going to give you a couple of scenarios and see how you interpret it. Now, it's Friday. This is not a multiple choice test. In fact, both of the answers are correct on here. So if a student asks to miss class and make up the work because they have an interview for graduate school, this is not an authorized university activity and therefore would not be a university approved absence. So faculty member A allows the student to miss class and submit the makeup work. Great. The faculty member does not need a UAA and should not refer the student to the UA office. It wouldn't be approved even if you did because it does not count as one. Faculty member B can also deny the request. Both faculty are in that realm with which to do it. If you were to be faculty member B, the student has the right to then go to you, go to your chair, go to the senior associate deans, but ultimately within that department, they're going to send it back to you as the faculty and work through that mechanism that they have. Okay, scenario 2, the faculty member receives a notification from the university approved absence office that a student has a UAA for specific dates. Faculty member A provides makeup work for the student, and faculty member B decides to not provide a makeup even though it is policy. So if faculty member B does that, know that the student should appeal through the department chair or designee because it was a UAA and therefore by not granting that request, you have violated the policy. I think that's probably all I need to say about that one. So we'll go to the next one.
Can I just say
Yeah.
that in that situation, it is not, I think it is very appropriate for a student to be able to go to your department chair or the next levels up.
Absolutely.
What I want you to also hear is that if you refer the student back to us, we will not be making that determination, right? Like I'm not going to come back to you or someone from my team is not going to come back to you and be like, this is what you should do. And that's a very frequent request we get from faculty is that, how do you want me to accommodate them? I am not the master of your class.
Right.
And we really do want to empower you as the faculty to be able to think through what's appropriate to allow the student to be able to make that work up.
Okay. So if scenario 3, the student tells the faculty member that they have the flu and are unable to come to class to take an exam. So as we mentioned before, flu is not considered a university approved absence. So the faculty member can provide a makeup exam or other work deemed equivalent. The faculty does not need to request a UAA from the office. If the faculty member does not excuse non-UAA absences, then it needs to be clearly stated in your syllabus. So please check your syllabus for that. Only significant and severe illnesses are considered university approved absences. This means that absences due to illness can and should be reviewed by the faculty and instructor based on your course policies, and don't refer them to the UAA office. There are faculty FAQs, which I think is one of the most beneficial pieces of work that this office has put through. So please check them out. They're for faculty as well as students. They're on the UAAO webpage, and they provide additional guidance on illness that fall into the category. They're also working on an algorithm to help the students determine this as part of the filling out of the UAA. And I think they're just really have done a fantastic job. Faculty, of course, we are encouraged to be flexible and supportive when possible, especially with what we've recognized through the learnings of COVID and on this journey. So now we again will give you these slides and you can have access to these links that really talk about options for alternative exams and makeup activities, as well as the general UAA guidance. And then there is the actual policy. We don't expect you to read that right now, but please take a moment and look at it. The bottom line, though, is, next slide, please. Yep. That this is a complicated piece, right? We can't solve all of this today, which is why EPC is working on this actively throughout this next semester. And so we're asking you all to engage with your faculty. As members of faculty council, you were elected, you are the voices. We want you to be able to empower your faculty and have conversations within your school, your department, et cetera. And so if you find areas that need further clarification within the policy, then please reach out to EPC because we are currently working on this. We're looking at scenarios like we've presented to you all today. We're benchmarking current practices, what other universities are doing, and then we're really looking at the best way to support faculty and students during this process. And we're really having a discussion about the percentage of class time missed and still being able to meet those learning outcomes. And so we will be giving those updates later on as part of our report for EPC annually, as we do. But the most important slide is the next slide, where you can sign up to be a part of our little army here of that as we try to help the faculty understand this really important policy. So thank you to all for listening to us, and we'll take questions now. Yeah.
We've got a question in the room, but I see the hand up online. We will get to you.
Hi, I'm Allison from the business school. Thank you so much for the work that you do. I think maybe I was 50 of those 5,000. So I apologize as well. One person in that office, really important context for me. We will be hearing less from you. I have found one of the reasons I reached out to your office is because students share something with me that may be difficult for them to discuss, emotionally disturbing for them to share. And I believe there are other professors need to know, but I do not believe they should have to have a self-exclusive conversation with every professor that they have a class with, especially if they don't trust that professor. So I'm wondering, is there an alternate channel where students, like a button they can press to say, hey, I'm struggling, let my professors know that I'm struggling. And they don't have to, and this has been directly asked for me. My students are like, this is what to do. And they don't have to share with all their professors, but it will be shared with all of them. Is that clear?
Yeah,
Okay.
Yeah, I think that's a really great distinction, because there are things that are appropriate to refer to the university approved absence office. And then there are situations like you're talking about that are super appropriate to be able to complete a care referral form on the Dean of Students website to indicate that that's the situation that you're talking about. Students gone through some type of trauma, they are in high emotional distress for whatever reason. The care referral form is the way to be able to do that. And then our team in the Dean of Students office, our student support and case management group, will then reach out to the student to be able to determine if what's necessary in terms of faculty notifications, because again, we sometimes will notify faculty about things. And then there are some times that it's appropriate for university approved absences. And so those are oftentimes two different and distinct ways that we can support students.
And I think it's worth mentioning too, if a student has a UAA, you cannot then ask them what it's for. It's already been determined by the office what it's for, and it's not anything that you can ask them to disclose.
Thank you. We have Christina Birch on Zoom.
Hi, this is Christina Birch. I'm in the Department of Biology, and some of you know, we teach a lot of very large lectures, and I'm actually really happy to follow that question, because I wanted to start off by saying thank you for the really amazing care referral service that you offer. And just to say back to that person, they do a great job following up. I hear from the students that they do. And while I like some aspects of the UAA approved absences, we really struggle in the large classes, and we find it works best, because just for an example, we might get 10 to 20 of those students emailing the night before the exam with the flu. It's quite hard to accommodate 10 to 20 makeup exams. So we tend to try to have policies that anticipate that every student will have to miss, say, up to 3 classes over the course of a semester. And we try not to require a UAA that, regardless of reason, they're allowed to miss them. I guess I appreciate some feedback on that. And in that case, really, the UAAs that make a big difference for us is the ones that students are missing multiple weeks. And so, super grateful, but anyway, if you could just comment on these.
Just so you know, every single one of those things that you've commented on, we've addressed so far this semester, and we're continuing to address for the rest of the semester. We've had a faculty member from large STEM classes come in to address. We have a EPC committee member who discussed how she's a large STEM teacher, and her UAAs account for trying to give exams and makeup exams account for something like, I think, 80% of her time instead of teaching to the rest of the class that she teaches. Instead of focusing on her teaching, she spends most of her time trying to figure out how to make up those exams. So this is all something the EPC is working very hard on. We're trying to understand, again, benchmarking from other schools, how they handle some of these things. If there's a limit on the number that we can accommodate per semester, all of this is stuff that we're discussing. We're trying to figure out and help faculty, especially to try and address faculty burnout with these UAAs.
Okay, and I guess that's just part of that. Is one of the things you're addressing grace policies, like instead of allowing them to make up work, allowing them to drop work. Because
again, this is all exactly what we're discussing. Yes, about whether or not a dropped exam, if you can give instead of giving it a makeup exam, if you allow the dropped exam to this, if they have a UAA, the dropped exam would be their UAA would be dropped exam, but you'd have to provide, again, makeup, like a practice exam or something where they can identify that material that was tested and covered in something like, but this is all something that is still on the,
okay. Well, you probably know, but I'll just say we used to drop exams and then we have felt discouraged from doing that recently. And so it'd be great to get consistent messaging. Thank you
back to that QR code again too.
She was the one in charge of the
QR. Can you tell? Any scenario like that, we want to hear from, because it just goes back into the work that we're doing. We're partnering with the registrar, we're partnering with the dean of undergraduate curriculum, we're the dean of students, obviously. So we are doing a really thorough kind of overview of what this is that we'll report back to you all. So please, we want feedback like that. We cannot solve it today though.
And my committee report was due today, and I can tell you the majority of what we've talked about are UAAs this semester. We've had a few other things come up, but it has been primarily focused on UAAs this entire semester.
Tony Hackney, Exercise Science. I've got my QR code already.
Thank you. I appreciate you.
Also, I haven't sent over thousands, but a couple hundred July. So one of the things I've had in the past, thinking about your question of a button they could hit, is counseling services has sent messages to me that this particular student is struggling. And I've been here a long time. And after I discovered that was something that could happen, whenever I've had a student come to me and say, you know what, maybe you should go to counseling services, then you don't have to repeat that to the next 5 professors. They can send it out. So I think that's another resource besides your office that could be helpful.
Yeah, totally. You may also receive communication from our gender violence services coordinators, as well as folks in the equal opportunity and compliance office. So while I'm here as the dean of students and talking about the university approved absence office, we've got a lot of different inputs that students going to go to. And our job is to be able to think about how we can create spaces so students have no wrong door. If they need help, if they need support, if you're the first person they come to, how can you do exactly what you're talking about and getting them connected, and to be able to minimize kind of the retelling experience. Thank you for your work.
Yeah. And again, it really is about making sure that the students are taken care of, but also that the faculty is taken care of as well. So this is all something that we're focusing on to try to clarify the policy. I think the policy is amazing. Joy and I think one other person came up with this in 2000. It was, I was gonna say, there are a lot of people. Okay, so I saw 2 names on a report and one of them was yours. I was gonna say, the other thing though, that I also want to say is nobody expected COVID to happen. And one of the things that happened is we were all allowing much more leniency in every aspect of class. You guys knew mental health, everybody was struggling. We were struggling, everybody was struggling. And it seems as though sometimes the students have continued on assuming that the policy that happened for COVID is still in place today. So we are trying to address those issues as well, trying to figure out a way of addressing that information for the students and try to get all of this information out for the students. Your UAA policy should be on your syllabus as well. It should be one of the bullet points on your syllabus, as well as all of the other things that they were talking about. And again, this is all something that we are working very hard to try to clarify and try to update the policy so that everybody, so that you guys have policy to fall back on and the students have policy to fall back on. So
Jennifer?
Thanks. Jennifer Smith in linguistics. As you can see, I'm still relatively COVID cautious, right? I'm one of the few people in this room wearing a mask. But I really, on the one hand, I do not want my students missing class at the drop of a hat. I want them in the room. I want them participating and learning. At the same time, I do not want them coming to class if they are symptomatic. And I think all of us as a faculty need to think about how to craft attendance policies that allow for people who are actually sick to not feel that they're compelled to come to the classroom. But then this needs to not pass through the UA office.
Exactly.
Right? So I would appreciate, I mean, I try to craft a relatively flexible policy where I grade them on participation in ways that do not all require being in the classroom, right? But I think maybe we would appreciate some guidance on how to navigate encouraging participation while discouraging the transmission of viruses.
Jennifer, just so you know, that was, I think, exactly what one of the things Christina was talking about. All of us try to facilitate the ability to not have our students come when they're sick. If they're, I think COVID and flu are the same. And I think that if you come with the flu and you're symptomatic because you're worried about missing a class or missing an exam, it's just equally as bad, if in some cases not worse. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to also understand this whole idea that I know that I'm also a person who gives allowances on participation. I require my students to come, but I give a policy of 10% or 25%, you know, absences. But if you have to roll in UAAs on top of that, it can conflate to a lot amount of time being missed. And so we're working on this. We're trying to identify how other universities do this, how we can handle this, and how it's something that we can figure out in a more set policy so that we can, you as a faculty can say, this is our policy and that I'm going to do this, and UAAs are a part of that.
And we've also been talking with Center for Faculty Excellence of how can we then create some of these messaging that can get out to faculty and help them think of those creative things that you're doing.
Exactly. And to encourage them to do it as well. I mean, because we should all be aware that, again, I am an immunologist and I do not want my students coming in with signs and symptoms. So we are with you on that.
Okay. I don't see anything else on Zoom. Anything in the room? There is actually one thing in the Zoom chat, which is a request for the slides, and I believe I heard you.
And maybe
say
the QR code at the end.
It mentioned especially.
Especially the need for the QR code. Exactly.
So we will post those on the website for today's meeting that will be available to you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, thank you all.
Okay, so we have just one more piece of business for today, and that is to accept our committee reports, including the report of the Educational Policy Committee, which you just heard an oral report from them, but they also submitted their annual written report, which has additional information about what they've been doing. So we have 4 committee reports this month to accept by title: Educational Policy, Appointments, Promotion and Tenure, University Government, and the Faculty Assembly Delegation. The reports were provided in advance for you to read, and all are scheduled to be accepted by title, which means the chairs of those committees have not been asked, other than EPC, to make any kind of formal presentation, but they're present to take any questions that you might have. So are there any questions for any of the chairs of the committees that submitted reports by title today? I don't see any in the room. Now I'm going to look at my laptop. I don't see any on Zoom either. You see any, Helena? Okay. No questions? All right. So unless there's an objection, I'd like to accept all 4 reports at once. Don't see any objections. Okay. Hearing no objection, is there an objection to accepting by unanimous consent? Hearing none, the 4 reports are accepted by unanimous consent. And that concludes our business for today. Let the record show that we adjourned at 4:56 early. We will be back in this room for our next council meeting on February 17th. The rest of the semester is still being worked out a little bit, but we'll see you here again in February. And without objection, today's meeting is adjourned. Thank you.
Yeah, exactly.